Hey everybody, welcome to Me's 2020. I am Leigh Loftus. I'm your host for the next little bit, and I am the founder of these ChefShots. And I was lucky enough to also be here last year, which was so awesome to be in person. Total bummer we don't get to do that this year, but I'm sure that the entire event has been awesome for you guys. With that, I'm going to do a high-level overview of everything that we touched on last year just to refresh. And if you weren't there, do not worry at all or stress, because everything I teach after that today is still going to be really valuable for you, and you don't have to have learned what we did last year in order to start practicing what I teach today. So when I'm going through it, you feel like, what is she talking about? Don't worry about it, like I said. And also, I have a YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, look up the ChefShots, and everything that I mentioned today you can find on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. 2019 review. We started out with different storytelling. I drilled home for you to ask yourself what's in your frame and why is it there. I taught you how to turn on your grid. We went over the rule of thirds. We went over squaring up your photos whenever applicable, not always, thinking about your full frame. We also went over your different camera settings. And in your smartphone, whenever you have that little focal box come up, you can press and hold it in order to access changing your exposure. And it gives you the little sun that you can then move up or down so that you're in charge of the exposure as opposed to the camera doing it for you. Then we jumped into the multiple camera lenses because each phone that comes out, they start releasing more and more lenses. And predictably, they're going to have even more in the next coming years, in my opinion. And so just above your shutter button on either the iPhone or an Android device, you are able to physically change which lens you're shooting on. We then moved into using the burst mode and how and when to use that. So it's really great for capturing pour shots like I have there, or maybe drizzle or garnishing. Use burst capture, which is very similar to a GIF or a GIF. Not quite sure how you say it. We went through that. Then I invited you guys to go to a live mode where you shot and we came back together and we went through editing, basic editing skills. So that's a high-level overview of what we did last year. And now what I'm going to do is jump into 2020's training for you guys. All right, so before I dive in, do you guys have an idea of what the most important aspect of photography, all photography, whether it's food or not, is? Think about it. It is light. And so what I want to talk to you about today is the temperature of different light sources. So let me pull up this Kelvin scale. This is how we measure the color of light. And on the left-hand side, it starts at the number 1,000, and then it goes all the way up to 10,000. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but you can already picture this. The orangish red, that's around sunset. And then you move into candlelight or our household overhead lights, like light bulbs. They're very yellow. Then we get into this weird color, which you're going to see an example coming up, which is this like greenish color, which is in every single fluorescent light. And I see so many chefs shooting in their kitchen, and I promise you it's doing your food no favors. Then we get into the middle, which is between 5,000 and 6,000, which is actually 5,500 is the most perfect time of day to shoot. So that's normally around midday or the most crystal clear white light. The reason that matters is because the color temperature of our light is going to pull out the color that's in your food. So even if you're shooting a green salad, if you shoot it in low tungsten candlelight or just in a restaurant in the evening, the color tonalities that you're going to get are going to be more orange yellow, and it's going to be very difficult for you to edit it to make it look accurate to the colors that were on the plate. I hope that's starting to make sense, but let me take you through a couple examples. So beginning at the top, shooting in really blue in Chicago, dead winter, actually early morning shoot, the top two photos here, you can see that they have a really blue tone. Now, it doesn't mean it's necessarily bad or good to shoot in any of these scenarios. I just want you to be armed with the most information possible, because if you're shooting in the middle of the morning, well, again, you're going to have a blue hue to your photos to compete with. Then we move it down to a little bit more midday. Again, Chicago wintertime. The two photos on the bottom still have a bluish hue, not too bad, but they were definitely shot in the winter. Then we move into the middle of the day. Whether it's cloudy or whether it is completely stark sunlight like this, what it's going to give you is the most accurate representation of the colors in front of you. And I use the patio photo so that you could see the flowers and the greens and the sky and the wood. Like every single thing in there is as most accurate to its natural color as it possibly can be. And then, same restaurant. It was a little bit early in my career, but I couldn't find a whole other set where I shot from the outside and then flipped around to the inside. So the top two photos are at outside with outside natural white light. They're a little bit bright, but they have the most accurate color representation of the cocktails being served. Then the bottom two photos, I physically flipped around, I went inside, and I have two different light sources happening. I have the outside light, which is coming in behind our cocktails, and then I have yellow tungsten, probably just overhead bulbs that are our main light source. And, it happens to be okay. The photos look fine, but this is the number one mistake I see in all early photographers shooting with their cell phone, shooting in restaurants. It's not knowing to simply turn off your overhead lights and pick one single light source. Because think about that for a second. Think about like mixing paints or mixing crayons when you were a kid and you're mixing colors. Well, if you have two different light sources, so you have your outside light, which is white or a little bit more blue, and then you mix it with yellow, your color palette is going to start to get muddy. Couple more examples. So here I have images in the kitchen. And remember before I mentioned that kitchen light is like this weird green, magenta, a little bit yellow. And look at the tonality of the chef's hands. Top photos, they're a little bit yellow, a little bit green, and then down below, they're a little bit more magenta. So when you choose to shoot in the kitchen fluorescent light, I promise you, it is almost impossible afterwards to get your colors to look natural and look how they were actually supposed to be portrayed. And moving on, shooting in candlelight, actual low light. And again, this light is beautiful. It's a beautiful setting. It's beautiful for the environment. But if you're trying to capture a beauty shot of your food, know going into it that the colors that are going to be pulled out are going to be yellow and orange. Last but not least, we have a very dark bar in Chicago, and same thing. They have like 4 or 5 different light sources. I wanted you to see the space so that you could see what I was working with for that cocktail shot. And it's just not doing any favors to the cocktail that's in front of us here. So just wanted to show you this because this is what you guys are most often familiar with seeing. These are on all digital cameras. They're not necessarily in our phones. But to recap, right in the middle, the 5500 to 6500 is average, middle of the day, white, pure light. And the more often that you can shoot with that color temperature of light, especially with your cell phone, the better color properties you will have in your photos moving forward. All right, you guys, so I hope that helped you understand how the different color temperatures of light work and why, if you're shooting in your kitchen or maybe you're shooting at night, why maybe your pictures don't come out looking the best. And it literally is because the color of the light that you're shooting in is not pulling out the best representation of the colors. Even if your eye sees it, our camera is not able to pick that up. So like I said, always be looking for, especially on your cell phone, try to shoot in the middle of the day when the light is the most close to white as possible. And that will give you the best representation of your colors. Next up, we're going to dive into learning about our different camera angles and orientation, how to shoot vertical, horizontal, and then properly shoot square for Instagram. And we'll move into a couple compositional rules from there, and I'll come back here to wrap it all up. So let's start with camera angles. So with our camera angles, you've got your lay flat angle. And lay flat is the best angle for smartphones if you're using a smartphone, because the primary lens on every smartphone is a little bit of a wider lens, which tends to make things look a little bit stretched out or a little bit wonky. So if you are doing an overhead or a lay flat image, it will yield better results for you. Whenever you're going to be doing a lay flat, you want to ask yourself the question, where are the details of my subject? They should be on the top. Think salads, pizza, soup, toasts, pasta, things like that. So the details are on the top of your image. Your subject will tend to lack height, so we'll get to the different angle coming up, but it wouldn't be a thing like a burger or a cocktail. Like those are very tall. So anything for a lay flat or overhead, it's great for subjects that lack height. But again, it doesn't mean that you can't shoot subjects like a cocktail from overhead. It just tends to be these flatter items. They're great for when you're just starting out, and they're great for smartphones, as I mentioned before. The reason they're great for when you're starting out is because overhead, the layers and the depth that you have to think about is very minimal. You don't have to think about the entire room behind you and what's there. So it's really, really great to simply be able to think about a couple layers and to start learning the compositional rules without feeling like you're not succeeding because you're trying to build an entire room around a shot. So I hope that makes sense. Next, we have the diner's view, or between 45 and 75 degrees. In these angles, your subject starts to have height and more dimensionality as well as texture that you want to show. Clearly, I have here fish, meat, salads. Again, it could be pastas. I have pasta here. So it's right out of the gate pointing out that not one rule is better than the other and not one rule always applies. But when you start to move down in between the 45 and 75 degree angle, your subject matter starts to have more height. It also starts to include more of your background, which means you have to start thinking about what's in your frame and why is it there, and does it complement or take away from your hero. It does make it a little bit more challenging on our smartphones, again, due to the lenses. The lenses in our phones, they tend to have a really sharp focus on a lot of things in the frame, which is why many people like the portrait mode on the iPhone or the food mode on Android or the selective focus on Android, because it allows them to create that softened background / softened depth of field / softened depth of field, which you see right here. But it's not natural, and it's digitally done, so it sometimes works out well and sometimes works out in your favor and sometimes it doesn't. So I just want to point out that, again, when you're shooting on a phone, it is a bit challenging as we start to get into this 45 to 75 degree angle as well as the 90 degree angle, but we will have a workaround for that. I'll have a demo for you. So next we have our 90 degree and straight on angle, and this is wonderful. And the question is, where are the details of my subject? If the details of your subject are on the front, like they are in sandwiches, burgers, cocktails, this bowl of chicharrones, then it's a really great angle to show all of those juicy elements that make up the dish. And oftentimes one of the biggest errors I see in early photographers is they don't bring their camera all the way down to that 90 degrees. It's like they're up just a little bit. So I will encourage you guys to really get it to that 90 degree angle so you can definitely show the layers that we're seeing here and all that juiciness. It does include the very full view of the background, which again makes it a little bit challenging, not impossible, does make it challenging for our smartphones. And again, it's tricky at first in general, whether you're using a smartphone or not, because when you're starting to build and compose photographs, it's hard enough to compose your dish, let alone have to think through all the way through the background. So in general, we like to start out with lay flats and overheads and work our way into 45 and 75 degree and then move into 90, and you just gain confidence and traction that way. So coming off of angles, we have to discuss our orientation. So we all know you have vertical orientation, which we have starting right here on the left. Then we have a horizontal shot in the middle, and then we have square, which square isn't technically an orientation. Square we've all come to know and love because of Instagram, and I wanted to discuss it because there's a specific way that you can capture a square shot without actually turning on the square mode, which I would prefer that you not do because it actually takes away from the integrity of your shot. So again, coming up, I will have a demo and show you how to plan for shots that include the background, as well as how to plan for shots where I ask you to create a square. So obviously, like we talked about, overhead is the best angle for your cell phone. Also, it's the easiest to execute because you don't have to worry about the background. So when people say that's their favorite angle, what's their favorite angle? Because it is the easiest. And when you start to move in to 45 to 75 and 90 degrees, it does get more challenging. It's harder, and less people are successful at it because they don't think through that whole entire question. What's in their frame and why is it there? So here I am at 45 degrees, and see right away in my frame, I've got my desk back there, I've got a paper shredder, I've got all kinds of stuff. And yes, I have the strawberries, and that's primary focus, but immediately your eye is drawn to all of that clutter and all of that mess. So, and then secondly, I have a 90-degree angle. And same thing, you can see myself recording across there, all that stuff. You see stuff in the shot. So every single time you pick up your phone to take a photo, ask yourself, what is in my frame and why is it there? And here I have just a piece of foam core to help you solve for this problem. If you're shooting at home, and plan for that, either move your table up to a blank neutral wall, or I could simply, here, let me show you real quick. Doesn't have to be right up against the wall, because sometimes I see people too close to the wall. I'm about 4 feet away from the wall. Well, that still allows for that to be a nice, clean background and not take away from the dish itself. You see what I'm saying? So you don't need to be right up against the wall. And like I said, push come to shove, worst case scenario, go get a white foam core and you can do your 90-degree angle. And again, it just allows the primary focal point to be your food and not to have distractions in the background. So sorry to drill it home and be a little bit harsh about it, but always ask yourself the question, what's in my frame? Why is it there? Move yourself or move the dish or move the stuff in the background. Always be thinking that, because again, instantly it's going to make your photos 10 times better. All right, everybody, now that you've learned all about the camera angles, your layers in the photograph, now we're going to talk about your different camera orientation. And let me get my screen share started for you. All right. So we're all we're familiar with shooting either horizontally or vertically, and now we're very familiar with the ever famous Instagram square. So I just want to go over that really quick. So we've got vertical shot at 90 degrees, vertical shot at 45 to 70. Let's go ahead, I'll just go shoot it for you so you can see how it would work. There we go, vertical, still vertical, 45 to 75, setting my focal point on that strawberry. And then still it's a vertical shot overhead. Well, then we could do it horizontally. You've got a horizontal shot, boom. Then you're horizontal here, 45 to 75. And then you've got horizontal overhead. Well, then we've been introduced to the Instagram square. I would prefer that you never use the square setting in your camera, because what that does is it's only taking that much of the frame. Well, you've been trained, you obviously have much more frame capacity, which means you get a larger quality photo. So it would be better if what you did, if you know you're shooting for Instagram. So let's pretend, I know this is gonna be a vertical shot. I'm gonna print it in a magazine or something like that. I know it's gonna be vertical. Well, if then I also wanna shoot it for Instagram, back up enough that when you crop it into a square, so you can see the bottom of the square, probably right under that strawberry, and then under this strawberry, I'll draw a line in there, and then the top of the square would be just above the back strawberries. Because that keeps the integrity of the shot, as well as gives you the highest quality image. So when you wanna also shoot for Instagram, build your set and back up and take a wider shot, both vertically and horizontally. So let me show you, again, I'll do it one more time. So we're gonna do a vertical, boom. Here's my vertical shot. I'm gonna turn on my HDR because it's a little bit bright. Switch it to be a horizontal shot. then I'm going to switch back to vertical. I'm going to scoot myself back, shoot wider, and there we go. Boom. And then see that very last one, I'm going to hit edit. I'm going to hit the crop tool at the very bottom, and I'm going to hit this at the very top where it allows me to then crop to square. There you go. There you have, I mean, it's a little dark photo. We're not going to go through editing it today because that's not today's lesson, but I wanted you to see, because now if I were to open that photo again and hit edit again, if I hit crop, then I could zoom back out. I do not lose the integrity of that photo. So you can see right there, I did not lose the integrity of it. It gives you more information. Now it's time to dive into different shapes, lines, and visual weight. And we're going to start with lines. Lines are one of the most important things in all photography. And I promise after we go through this training, you're going to start seeing them all over the place, and I cannot wait for that to happen. So, lines determine how the viewer's eye will move through the image. Lines create movement, rhythm, balance, and harmony. They also create visual interest and patterns. And you can see in these images below, I have the various lines going through the image below the dishes themselves on each of them. One of the most common mistakes that I see in early photographers' careers, and myself included, is not knowing to look at the direction of your lines before you take a photo and to intentionally move your dish or yourself to have the lines either go vertical, horizontal, diagonal, or in a way that works with your dish itself. And people wouldn't have thought that this pizza itself, I intentionally placed along this line that's happening on the table as well to draw the viewer eye through the photograph. Lines create visual interests and patterns. Vertical lines, like we have over here, they signify power and they signify strength, while horizontal lines signify stability. Same with diagonal. They're a little bit in between, but they kind of go both ways. They could be a little bit power, strength mixed with stability. And what happens with food or props is, actually, my picture here is not, I didn't straighten this line. I should have straightened it. I know the one I delivered is straight. So that is an example of what I was talking about before. This line right here is not straight. And what will happen to any viewer's eye is their head is going to tilt a tiny little bit to try to straighten the image. So you can see right out of the gate with an example of my own photo how if I had just straightened this shot, it would feel a lot more balanced. Secondly, at first glance, this shot can feel a bit messy, but it's actually thoughtfully composed. When there are elements in your shot that are of the same shape or color, it allows the viewer's brain to create a perceived relationship between those items or the optically implied lines. So when you look at all of these red peppers, they move your eye through the frame very intentionally to help, again, create cohesion and balance and harmony, which is what we're always striving for. And I'm actually really glad that this shot, I did not think it through. I just pulled the wrong one, but that this line is off so you can immediately see what I was just talking about, where if you don't square up your lines, that's what I like to call it, square everything up very intentionally, your viewer, their head will tilt and they will feel off balance when they look at the photo. So let's move on to a different example. This leads us right into our next compositional tool, which is the use of triangles in composition to move the viewer's eye through your frame. So we just talked about optical lines, and as we have happening here, yes, the cheese is cut into a triangle, then the greens are in a triangle, then the way the shape of these, the cracker lines are happening, and then we've got this beautiful drip coming down. Well, what that does is it creates closure for the viewer's eye. When you have triangles in an image, it creates, like I just said, closure. They move from one point to the next, back to the center, and you're in control of exactly where they're looking. So let's move to this dessert. The same thing here. We've got a blackberry, a blackberry, a blackberry. So you look, you move down, you're gonna move back, and then you're gonna come back. So your eye stays in the frame. It'll check out a couple other things, but you'll always be pulled back. And there aren't actually really any lines in this shot having you do that. So you will see that the lines of the table, although very, very faint, that line right there pushes the viewer's eye right into the dish where I want it to go. I could have had it going the other way, but that wouldn't be as powerful as it pointing right into the dish. So I hope you're starting to see the value of lines, physical lines in the shot on the tabletop themselves and how important they are, as well as optical lines that can lead the viewer's eye without actually having a physical line drawn there. Let me show you a couple more examples. So here we have just a couple pastries, and simply the way that they're placed, because they were the same size, it was like, how do we put them in here? I wanted them to look unique and interesting. I didn't want them in a straight line, so I built a triangle out of two of them and then squeezed the other in the middle, allowing a couple to fall off intentionally because you know what they are. So again, it keeps your eye in the frame. You'll move from one of the pastries to the next, and you'll just keep moving around before you leave the image. Here we have waffles with raspberries and cream and honey, and what I did with the raspberries is same thing. First of all, our plates are in a triangle, so that has your eye in. Then we have the raspberries moving you around in one triangle, second set of raspberries moving you around in another triangle. And let's look at one more example. The forks, again, in a triangle, boom, boom, boom. So the use of triangles throughout your composition, like I said, can really, really direct the viewer's eye without them even knowing that you're doing it, and enhance your image to just make it feel so balanced. And like, you're gonna look at the image and be like, oh, that just looks really, really great. And without having the trained eye, which you're learning now, you wouldn't even know why. So it's a really, really wonderful tool. So let's go through a recap. Lines always move your viewer's eye through the image. They create movement, they create rhythm, balance, and harmony. Optically implied lines can and should be used by combining similar elements or colors. Vertical lines signify power and strength, while horizontal lines signify stability. Lines can be found throughout, whether it's in food or props. And no matter what, lines are a really great way to help tell the story that you're trying to tell. So next up, I will show you guys a quick demo on how I use lines in my photography.
So now I'm restyling these cupcakes to create a shot with vertical lines. So let's go ahead, boom. I'm gonna use the rule of thirds. I'm gonna place my cupcakes right on the edge here. There we have it. And that looks pretty good. Boom, there we have it. Let me just double check and make sure I'm happy with that. Yes, that's great. So technically that image could be used as, that image that I just shot could be used as a vertical shot or a horizontal shot because of the negative space and how I laid it out. So again, you can create lines. I'm using a white tabletop, but you can create lines with your actual tabletop itself, or you can create lines with the food itself. All right, you guys, so I have this image next to me. I wasn't able to do a screen cap, but since it's next to me, you can see I just created the image using optically implied lines based on the contents of what's in the frame. So the red toppings of the cupcakes will move you from red to red to red, and the yellow will come in next to that. It's softer, but it will come in next to that and also lead you back through the image based on the different colors of yellow connecting. So now I'm gonna reset this using triangles to help you out, help you see how I do it, and just resetting a simple overhead shot. So here we go. All right, so as you can see here, there's a couple of triangles, but they're not as intentional as I would like them to be. So I'm just gonna go ahead and reset and move things around here. So we've got, boom, like that's a really nice intentional triangle that we have. Take that out. So here we have a really nice boom. So that goes there really nicely. And you've got that. Let's close that off. So here we have a nice triangle there. Let's add this guy here, one. So you've got that. So as you can see, I mean, I've got two red, let me sit down so you can see me. I'm in the frame, I'll have it next to me. I've got the red triangles here, here, and here, making a triangle, here, here, and here. And then I've got, how did I do it? Yep, I go yellow, 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 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, oh. Well, there you go, that happens sometimes. Happen to not ruin the shot. Let's replace it with this guy. Yep, so I've got multiple yellow triangles. So I've got 1, 2, 3, that's one triangle. 1, 2, 3. And then last but not least, we've got 1, 2, 3. So let me go ahead and snap this so I can have that for you guys. Let's do, and boom.
All right, you guys, we just covered a ton of ground in that short amount of time. So let's do a quick recap. We started out by talking about the different color temperatures of light and making sure that you're aiming, especially on your cell phone, to be shooting in natural light and looking for that middle of the day so that it can be as close to white light as possible so that your colors are as accurate as possible. Then we moved into your angles and orientation, as well as how to properly compose your shot for a square in Instagram so that you don't compromise the integrity of your overall shot. We then moved into different lines, optically implied as well as actual lines, and using triangles to compose your shots. Now, I'm a little bit sad that we don't get to break out and actually have you practice these one-on-one together. However, I would love it if you do start practicing these to find me on Instagram at the ChefShots and tag me. So start practicing using horizontal lines, vertical lines. Switch your shots to be in natural light, but start pushing yourself to actually practice these things because that's how you'll actually learn. So again, I can't thank you enough for listening to me for this little bit of time. I'm so honored to be part of Mies. I hope that you do find me on social media and that all of these tips are super helpful for you. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. And again, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Mies is so awesome. Hope to connect with all of you soon. Happy shooting. Cheers.